The night was unusually cold for early spring. James Turner sat alone in his small countryside cottage, the fireplace crackling faintly beside him. Outside, the wind carried the smell of damp earth and pine from the woods beyond the hill. It had been 3 years since his father, Arthur, passed away, and yet tonight James couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't truly alone. The clock struck midnight, each chime echoing through the quiet house. James put down his book and rubbed his eyes. He had spent the day working on an article for the local paper. Stories about rural folklore and ghost sightings. The irony wasn't lost on him. He didn't believe in ghosts, not really. But tonight, something about the air made him uneasy. A faint knock echoed through the hallway. James froze. He wasn't expecting anyone. His nearest neighbor lived nearly half a mile away. The knock came again, louder this time. 3 firm raps that sent a chill crawling down his spine. He grabbed a torch from the side table and walked slowly to the front door. His heart thudded as he peered through the frosted glass. A shadow stood outside. "Who's there?" he called, voice trembling slightly. No answer. James swallowed, the torchlight shaking in his hand. He unlocked the door, opening it just enough to peek out. The night air rushed in, biting and cold. Standing at the end of the porch was a man in a dark coat. His head was slightly bowed, his shoulders hunched as if weighed down by something unseen. The porch light flickered, and James caught a clearer look. It was his father. James's breath caught. His father, exactly as he remembered him. Gray hair combed back neatly, his old work coat, and the same kind eyes that had comforted him as a child. "Dad," James whispered, his voice breaking. The man looked up, and though his face was unmistakable, something in his expression was wrong. Too still, too heavy. "James," the figure said softly, voice echoing as if from a great distance. "It's cold. Let me in." Every instinct screamed at James to slam the door, but the sound of that familiar voice clawed at his heart. Tears stung his eyes. You can't be here. You're gone." His father tilted his head slightly. "I just want to come home." The words hung in the air like frost. James stepped back. "This isn't real." The man smiled, though the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then why are you shaking?" The door creaked as the wind pushed against it. James took another step back, gripping the handle tightly. The air seemed to thicken. The fire in the living room flickered and dimmed. Then the figure moved forward. Not walking, not stepping. Gliding. His feet made no sound against the wooden porch. James slammed the door shut, locking it fast. His breath came in ragged bursts as he stumbled backwards. A second later, the knocking resumed. This time it wasn't gentle, it was frantic. "James, open the door. Please, it's me." James covered his ears, backing away until he hit the wall. The knocks turned into pounding, shaking the entire frame. Then silence. He waited, straining to hear any sound. None came. Slowly, he crept back to the door and peered through the peephole. The porch was empty. He exhaled shakily and turned back toward the living room. The fire had nearly gone out, the room washed in shadows. He sat down, trying to convince himself it was exhaustion, stress, or an overactive imagination. But then he noticed something. Muddy footprints. They started just inside the door, heavy human prints leading across the wooden floor towards a hallway. James followed them slowly, each step making his heart pound harder. The prints led to the back of the house, to his father's old study. He hadn't been in that room since the funeral. "Dad," he whispered, his voice barely carried. The door to the study creaked, opened by itself. Inside, the air was freezing. His torchlight flickered as he stepped in. Everything was just as his father had left it. The old typewriter, stacks of books, the faint smell of tobacco. Then the typewriter clicked. Once. Then again. James froze. The keys moved, pressing down his own invisible hand were typing. Slowly, letters began to appear on a yellowed sheet of paper still in the carriage. "Let me in." James stumbled back, knocking over a chair. No, this isn't real." The typewriter fell silent. Then the door slammed shut behind him. He lunged for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Something cold brushed the back of his neck. James. He turned slowly, every muscle trembling. His father stood in the corner, face pale, eyes dark hollows. "You didn't open the door," the figure said softly. "You left me out there." James's voice cracked. "You're not my father." The thing smiled faintly. "You call me Dad." The lights flickered violently. Books fell from the shelves, papers scattered. The room seemed to pulse with a low hum, as if reality itself was shaking. James threw his shoulder against the door until it burst open. He ran, heart hammering, through the hall, out the front door, and into the night. He didn't stop until he reached the edge of the property. The wind howled around him, behind him. The cottage stood dark and silent. But as he looked back one last time, he saw a movement in the upstairs window, a shadow standing perfectly still, watching him. The next morning, James returned cautiously with a friend from the village, Tom. Together they searched the house, but there was no sign of anyone else. No footprints, no broken locks, nothing. The typewriter sat quiet, the page blank. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. "You've been working too hard, mate. Take a few days off." James nodded weakly, pretending to agree. But that night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his father's face, the way it had twisted into something wrong. At dawn, he decided to pack and leave for a few days. But when he opened the front door, something made his stomach drop. On the porch lay a small, muddy footprint, child-sized. He froze. His father had died 3 years ago, but his father's body had been found for 3 days after the heart attack. Back then, James had been away for work. He'd only come home to find the door locked and the house silent. Now he realized someone had been knocking even then. He looked up at the woods beyond the house, where mist coiled between the trees. And in that mist, for just a second, he thought he saw a shadow, tall, familiar, and utterly still. Then it was gone. That evening, James checked into a small inn in the nearby town. He tried to convince himself it was all coincidence, the knocks, the figure, the footprints. But deep down, he knew what he'd seen. Just after midnight, he woke suddenly. The room was silent, except for the faint creak of the floorboards. Someone was outside his door. A shadow moved beneath the gap, slow, deliberate steps. Then came a whisper. "James." He pressed his back to the wall, shaking his head in disbelief. "Go away," he hissed. "You're not real." The whisper came again, louder this time, close enough to the door that it vibrated. "Let me in." And then the doorknob turned. James leapt forward, holding it still with both hands. "Leave me alone," he shouted. The turning stopped. Silence. He waited for nearly a full minute before pulling his hands away. Then, slowly, he looked down. Beneath the door lay a small folded piece of paper. He picked it up with trembling fingers. It was yellowed and slightly damp, the edges smeared with dirt. On it, typed in faint black ink, were 3 words. "I am home."